Hello again and welcome back to Exploring the North Shore. Yes, we are finally back with a new episode. I have missed doing the podcast and bringing you these stories and ideas from the North Shore. So I'm back again and I am so excited about this episode. It is technically a solo episode. I'm not here with Martha today, but it's just me, Jaye, solo. However, we are going to hear another voice in just a moment that you will probably be very familiar with if you have listened to the podcast from the beginning. And that is because I am interviewing Joe Friedrichs, the original co-host of Exploring the North Shore with me. Joe left the podcast about a year ago now, and one of the main reasons he left the podcast was to go work on a book project that he was working on. I knew a little bit about the book at the time, but I didn't know kind of all the interesting aspects that were going into what he was doing. And then another, I guess kind of a tragic turn of events happened around the time that the book was finishing up that kind of changed the direction of where the book went. And we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, in the interview. So I'm recording this podcast right now on December 9th, and I'm going to do the interview with Joe tomorrow on December 10th. And then when the podcast episode comes out, it's actually going to be released. I mean, if you're listening to this on launch day, you'll know it's December 15th. And we are going to be doing a giveaway associated to the book. So please listen through the episode. At the very end, I will let you know how and where you can enter to win your own signed copy of Joe Friedrichs' new book called Her Island, which is the story of Janice Matichuk, who was the longest serving interior ranger at Quetico Provincial Park, which is up in Ontario. It kind of borders the Boundary Waters canoe area. So we cover a lot of stuff on the Boundary Waters. And now we're going to be talking a little bit about the Canadian side of the wilderness, which is Quetico Provincial Park. I do want to add that our big plans for this past summer were actually to go up to Canada because I love Ontario. I especially love going to Thunder Bay. And we had all these big plans to go to Thunder Bay, but the border has been closed. And part of our plans actually were to go up into Quetico as well. And amongst those plans, as suggested by Joe, Martha and I were going to speak to Janice Matichuk, who the book is about that he wrote. You will hear very soon about the circumstances that will make that not possible in my interview with Joe. It's one of my questions, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the what happened there. So listen, this is the interview with Joe Friedrichs on his new book, Her Island, and then listen to the end to figure out how you can win a signed giveaway of his book. This podcast episode is sponsored by Cascade Vacation Rentals. They know that life has a tendency to be overwhelming at times, and busy schedules often leave people feeling overwhelmed and disconnected. That's why they're here, to offer you the space and opportunity to reconnect to what's important. Cascade Vacation Rentals has one of the largest selections of privately owned vacation rental homes and cabins on Minnesota's North Shore of Lake Superior, from Duluth to the Canadian border. Their team is there to help you and your family or small group enjoy a vacation you'll remember for years to come. Visit them online at www.cascadevacationrentals.com. And don't forget to use promo code PODCAST for the largest % off discount available at any given time. Again, that's www.cascadevacationrentals.com. On the phone now, I have Joe. Joe, how are you doing?
Jay, I'm doing, all things considered, not too bad.
That's good to hear. So we haven't actually heard from you since, I don't even remember when.
About this time last year, or a month or two before.
Oh, that's right. Wow, a year goes by really fast. So Joe, of course, used to co-host the podcast with me in the early days before Martha. Call them the pre-Martha days.
Yes.
And you left the podcast for a couple of reasons, but one very specific one is that you were writing a book.
That's right. And that book is now complete.
Complete. I'm actually holding it in my hand as we speak, and I've started reading. Confession, have not finished.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Terrible. But I have read the first few chapters, and for anybody who doesn't know, go ahead and tell us, what is your book about?
Well, it's called Her Island, and it's about the longest serving interior ranger in the history of Quetico Park, which is just across the border from the place that you and I explored a few times on your podcast, Jaye. The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is in Minnesota. On the Ontario side is Quetico. It's on the other side of Sag, the Canadian side of Saginaw Lake at the end of the Gunflint Trail. And this woman, Janice Matichuk, it's essentially her biography, but it's about her time at the Cache Bay Ranger Station primarily, which is the entrance to Quetico coming in from Sag and the end of the Gunflint Trail. So it's about her life and her experiences at this ranger station. 35 years she worked there, Jaye, and not to be a spoiler or anything about the book or her life, because it says so right up front, that Janice unfortunately passed away this year, actually, in 2020, in August, before the book came out. So it's kind of it pulls at your heartstrings a little. Certainly, for me, it was very emotional. We started the project, and Janice was not sick at all. I mean, I've been planning and writing this for several years now, and she was supposed to still be working at Quetico, and that was part of the fun we were having initially as we were working on it together, was that she was going to sell it in the ranger station, and it would be an interactive thing with the canoe campers that came through Cache Bay. And Janice got brain cancer and very quickly passed away this summer. So it was a big turn of events.
So you did start writing the book with Janice. There was she had a lot of input into it. In fact, I remember last summer, maybe it was last fall, her coming to Grand Marais and stayed in your little writer's cabin there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was originally, the concept of the book that Janice and I hatched was not so much a biography, but more me chronicling, doing, stories of her time at the ranger station, from rescues to animal encounters, people she met, and more of it like an adventure book based, with reality. It was true stories and such. But then it became just her whole life. I became more intrigued by it, and I thought, your whole story is really interesting. She was the first woman that was a logger in Ontario, and the first to graduate from Sault Ste. Marie College in forestry as a woman, and her whole personality is kind of very captivating. So it started to shift more toward a biography even while Janice was still alive, and then afterward it definitely became more of a personal book about her as opposed to just some sort of an adventure, something you'd read to get inspired about canoeing or something, which I think actually still comes through. I've heard from some people, actually, a guy in California said, I want to come to Quetico. That's my next, thanks for writing the book, and I can't wait to come to Quetico after reading this. So yeah, it's a variety of things now.
I will say I have not made it to Quetico yet, and the plan was to go this summer. Of course, that didn't happen because the border to the United States and Canada is closed, and you do have to cross. In fact, isn't that part of Janice's job, was to choose technically a border crossing station? Yeah,
she is the gatekeeper, essentially, of who gets into Quetico from this southeast entrance, which is a primary place to get in. Certainly, it's the place from the Gunflint Trail in Cook County, and coming up Highway 61 in that area. And yeah, you go in and you have to show her your remote area border crossing permit that you get, and she issues all your permits to the park, and she is not necessarily a border agent or anything like that. She's employed by the provincial parks in Ontario and the park system, but she verifies all your border permits, or she did when she was there.
So essentially, if you came into Quetico Park through Cache Bay, anytime in the past 35 years, you've probably, or at least in the summer, May through September, October she was there?
Yeah, mid-September typically. Sometimes a little bit later, but she would be there. Yes, the odds of you meeting her if you went through there are extraordinarily high. She did have a couple days off she used to be there with her family. She raised 2 children there, and was married when she started, and has since was divorced in the later stages she was there. But so then she started getting days off, 2 days. They'd have something like a temp ranger, or so she could live a little bit. And that's when she started really coming to Grand Marais more. she met people. She loved to come to North House Folk School and go to the contra dances or any type of an event there. She would go to the Gunflint Tavern and dance, and she met a lot of people in town. You mentioned that she had come and stayed with us for a while we were working on the book, and I'd come to town with Janice. This was before COVID, and so we'd go buy groceries or whatever. And she knew more people in town than I did, like by a lot. And people, were really excited to see her, all ages, men and women, children, and always, how's Cache Bay, how's Quetico, and just, she was a talker too, and she was not short on the gift of gab by any stretch. And so people would just stop and chat with her for a long time, but she really was so connected to you when you were speaking with her that it was hard not to just kind of fall into, like, this person is amazing. I'm speaking with an amazing person right now, is how you could tell people had a reverence for her.
And she had some very good friends from the trail, including Bonnie Schutte, who we spoke to in one of our Gunflint Trail. I think it was the Blueberry and then Chickawauk Museum. So Bonnie Schutte is the curator or manager of the Chickawauk Museum. So we interviewed her. She and Janice were very good friends. In fact, Bonnie shows up in your book.
Yeah, a couple different times. She's in a few different chapters. They would do some adventures in Quetico that Janice would kind of drag her along on these pretty hardcore trips, and Bonnie has some funny stories about that in the book. And yeah, just they were close friends. Also, Sue Prom from Voyager Brewing, and also the outfitter at the end of the trail, and just other people, Deb Mark at Seagull Outfitters, people that I think we, if we didn't interview them on your podcast, we at least mentioned them probably.
And we do have plans, of course, once, hopefully by next summer, or at least the summer of 2022, podcast plans are for Martha and I to spend a lot more time on the Gunflint Trail and meeting those people. And just hearing the stories, even me personally, just by mentioning your book one time to somebody, Paula Powell, whose parents used to own, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for forgetting this right now, but her family owned something on Seg.
It's a historic establishment on Seg, and that they've now leased some of those cabins up there that you're talking about. But they're mentioned. Dick and Sherry Powell are in the book as well. And
it's just funny mentioning it to Paula. We had maybe a 15-minute Facebook Messenger conversation where she just went on and on about Janice and what kind of person she was. And I feel like anytime Janice comes up in a conversation, that's what you get from anybody who's met her. She was definitely a figure that was larger than life.
Yeah, it's not just like when you mention her, people are going to have kind of a normal reaction. She made an impression on everybody that I talked to. I have, interviewed dozens and dozens of people and park officials in Canada, people all over Canada. A lot of the people in the book are from Canada, but a lot of local connections too to Cook County and the Gunflint and Grand Marais, and everybody would light up and want to talk for a long time, different stories and just how she made them feel more confident about being a woman in the wilderness or traveling with family through, Quetico is different than the Boundary Waters in the sense that it's more remote, rugged. The campsites are nothing like at all what you would expect what you've seen on your trips. Jay, I know you've done some trips since even when we were starting the podcast, but that it's just a more remote, rugged place, and you need a certain level of skill or at least confidence. And Janice really instilled that in people and talked about safety and how to do things the right way. And yeah, she was just such an amazing person. I really do miss her. I wish that she could be here, to talk about. I wish you were interviewing her and not me, to be honest with you, because she's just such a character. She was. I'm really honored to be able to share her story in this book, and I hope people enjoy it.
And as a woman who enjoys being out in the wilderness a lot, the one thing that sticks with me in reading the stories is that when she first started at Cache Bay, she showed up with a baby. I mean, a relatively young baby.
Yes, that's right. Her daughter Ingela was an infant essentially when they got there, and then she had a son too couple years later, Leaf. And so she raised them on the island seasonally, but they, for the large part, I mean, imagine I know in Silver Bay you had fond memories of playing along Lake Superior and stuff when you were growing up, but imagine growing up on an island in Quetico.
Literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
Like it's you have to be very purposeful to end up in that specific spot.
Mm-hmm. So that's a part of it too, is their upbringing on the island and how that shaped that early, at least those first 16 years or 18 years on the island for Janice. And then it's kind of, so that's, a big part of the book. And then her as by herself up there for kind of those last 15 years or so.
How much of the book did you have left after Janice passed away?
Well, the whole book was done actually in May, except the last chapter. And the last chapter, we were going back to the island. It was all booked, and the park gave us clearance to come back, and we were going to the spot where the guy drowns in chapter 1. That is, again, not to be a spoiler because it's chapter 1 and it happens right away. But it's a story about 6 Minnesota guys who went canoeing in Quetico, and all their canoes capsized as they were going back to the Gunflint Trail right at Cache Bay. And Janice found them in this horrible storm and saved 5 of them. They all would have died, likely, and she saved 5 of the 6. So one guy drowned, and then I was going back with one of the guys that she saved, kind of the leader of that trip. His name's Mark Hargis, who lives in the Twin Cities. And we were going there with Janice to the spot where the canoes capsized, and it was going to be his first time back there, 20 years to the day. June 1st, 2020 is when we were going. Then the pandemic changed all that, and the border was closed, and so we kept pushing it back. We were thinking, well, maybe in July or, whenever. And then Janice got sick in June, and so all that needed to be done as of May was the last chapter. And we were going to get everything rolled out certainly by Thanksgiving was the original plan. Then I had to rewrite quite a bit of stuff. Actually, I didn't then complete the book until like late August because we changed a lot of stuff, and it made it difficult to bless the editors and the publisher because people were speaking about Janice as though she was alive. Every quote and tenses, about descriptions of events were changed, and it made it kind of complicated from an editing and writing perspective to change it without redoing the whole book. So it was complicated, definitely, but that's just what happened. I mean, it's terrible what happened, but that's just the reality of it.
I do remember you were mentioning, we must have had a conversation about you going back up to finish it. I think I asked you, like, how's the book going? Because I want to talk about it on the podcast. And you're like, I just have this last chapter, and this is going to happen. And I remember when they announced the border was closing, I sent you an email. I'm like, are you still going to be able to do this? And you're like, oh, probably not. Mm-hmm. And then a few weeks went by, they kept extending the closure. And then, I knew Janice was sick. She got sick and she got diagnosed in June, correct? Yep,
that's right. And then she had a okay month, June into July. I actually interviewed her on WTIP, the radio station. Her last interview was in the summer. It was live on the air, and that's actually the last time that I ever spoke to her. Was on the radio, and it was a really great conversation though. And then those last few weeks were pretty rough, and she was just with her family, and Ingela and Leaf were there the night that she passed away at home, and it happened obviously very quickly, but those last few weeks she was kind of out of touch.
So what do you think, this is just conjecture at this point, what do you think is going to be happening with Cache Bay? What do you think the future of Cache Bay is going to be? How can somebody possibly come into that position after Janice left it?
Yeah, I've asked the park superintendent that. His name's Trevor Gibb, and I asked him that, like right kind of as in those final weeks, and right, I believe, after Janice passed away. And it was too soon to speculate, and he was very emotional. He's not too much older than I am. He's probably in his 40s, I think he is. And he looked up to Janice, had that motherly figure, wisdom, experience of Quetico and Cache Bay, that it was too soon for him to say, and probably too for personnel reasons he couldn't express. Janice's son Leaf has actually started working there. He was working some of the weekend shifts to cover for his mom when she came to town in 2019, and it seemed to be a pretty good fit. It was just a kind of a try it out type thing. But it sounded like he enjoyed that, and maybe there's a future there. I'm just speculating. But it'll be hard. It'll be impossible to replace her. Nobody will probably ever be a park ranger in Quetico for 35 years, and definitely nobody will be as dedicated to the job as she was. It's not like she made a vast fortune doing it. Far from it, as a matter of fact. So it's a seasonal job. There's only so many people who would do that, and for 35 years, probably it will be. I think it's safe to say nobody's ever going to come close to matching that ever again.
There'll be a little hole in Quetico now that we'll just have to remember by the stories. And I think especially if you talk to anybody on the Gunflint Trail at any point, if you're up there staying at a resort or an outfitter or you're getting outfitted, I think they would probably have a lot of stories to share. Like you said, anytime you ask questions, you get a story for ages.
Yeah. And I think that's why the book is going to be, why I'm most proud of the book is that it's on a shelf, it'll be there forever. You do a lot of stuff with social media, Jaye, and it's a quick turnover. A post gets lost in a thread after a few days, and in radio where I work, it's the next news story is only as important as the one coming. I mean, it's a kind of a cycle of quick things that happen, whereas a book is more of a permanent thing, especially like at a Gunflint Trail rental or some of your vacation, some of the Cascade vacation rental properties, where it could be on a shelf, and people who are here on a rainy day or a snowy day, it's not that long to read it. You could probably certainly read it in a weekend if you found some time. That her stories now are locked forever in those, they're there. It's not just, it won't just go away in a social media thread or something.
The legacy will live on.
Exactly.
Forever.
Exactly.
And okay, the book came out 2 weeks ago now?
It came out Cyber Monday, the Monday after Thanksgiving. People, I think, actually were able to maybe get some orders that weekend, the day after Thanksgiving, but it was in the bookstore in Grand Marais maybe later that week,
I think I picked up I got a call that my copies were in on either Wednesday or Thursday. It was Thursday, actually, because I was actually at work that day. I only work on Thursdays now, but yeah, I got the phone call that it was in on Thursday. I was able to go there and pick up my copies. Speaking of which, I did pick up some extra copies, and we are going to do a giveaway, so I'm going to go over that at the end. I won't make you sit through how that's going to work, but I do have 2 signed copies of your book that will be given away to readers of the story, or of the podcast.
Yeah.
How is it going? Have you heard about how book sales are going?
Yeah, oddly enough, my cousin who lives in New Mexico went to order his copy from Amazon. You can get it through 10,000 Lakes Publishing. Should give a shout out to them. They're the publishers of the book. They're in Minneapolis. You can order it directly from their website, 10,000 Lakes Publishing, or you can get it through Amazon. A lot of people are doing that. Of course, it is also in the bookstores in Grand Marais as well. But a lot of people, like my cousin in New Mexico, order it from Amazon. He goes to order his on, today is like December 8th or something is when he went to order his. And the first thing that pops up, you know how you can see if it's like a popular seller or whatever? Number 1 seller in Ontario outdoors, or something to that effect. And so he was like, hey, you're the number 1 seller in Ontario books or outdoor books, which was pretty cool. And yes, sales are going pretty well. We think of, Jaye, of course, or people buying it in Grand Marais or the Gunflint or Minnesota. And Janice is Canadian, she, her people that know her the most and throughout the course of her life, she was born and raised in Ontario and lived all over the province. And so that's where a lot of people are buying the book, is Canada, all over Canada, from British Columbia to Saskatchewan and all over Ontario. So yes, sales are good.
That's great. Any future book plans, or are you just kind of reveling in finally being done with this one?
Well, I'm always got something burning upstairs. I really learned a lot about rescues and became kind of intrigued by some of the experiences, especially talking with Mark, who is one of the guys that the guy I was referencing earlier, and just how that impacts them through the course of their life to be rescued and your friend dies and the impact. And I had done another story this summer about a guy that died on Tuscarora Lake in the Boundary Waters.
Very interesting about that. Our listeners of the podcast will recall that we were actually, Martha and I were on the Gunflint Trail speaking with Carl Madsen from Rockwood Outfitters the day that happened. And during the recording of that podcast, the emergency vehicles were just flying by. So we were talking about water safety, especially water safety early in the season that very day. So it just, if this sounds familiar to you, that drowning on Tuscarora happened the day we happened to be there.
Yeah. So I'm learning. I got my wheels started spinning about how I could do some of those stories and put those into a book and as an educational tool about, yes, the Boundary Waters is amazing and Quetico and this whole area, but there is a certain, there's risk and how safety is an important part of every trip, or how it should be, not just fishing or whatever it is you want to do on a trip, that there's more to it. And so that's something I'm thinking about. But yeah, I'm just kind of letting this sink in. It's interesting because I don't really, it's great that people are buying the book, but I only care about that because I want them to read Janice's story. So it's not like I'm tracking it for personal financial reasons or something. It's really interesting to just know that people are hearing her story, because it really is amazing to hear, to kind of just start at Cache Bay, see little Janice growing up. She played the accordion. She was just kind of like this awkward kid, and then she becomes this amazing person of this beautiful wilderness. And yeah, she's got a great story. So I think it would appeal to people who've never been to the Gunflint Trail or the Boundary Waters or Quetico, just because she's just a kind of a pioneer of all things that are cool and represent this area. She's so symbolic to me of like what type of people live here and who can thrive up here.
I'm very sad I never got to meet her. I'm very sad I never made it. Again, the pandemic kind of threw things for a wrench with a lot of things, but I'm happy your book got out. I'm happy I was able to get my hands on some copies. And I'm happy we were able to hop on the phone here today and be able to talk about it, because I haven't actually had a conversation with you about it. I do remember the very early stages of you writing it. And so it's really fun to kind of watch the whole process flow from the very beginning to the very end. So thank you for coming on today. And of course, people, like you said, can buy the book pretty much anywhere. Amazon or the Drury Lane local bookstore here in Grand Marais has several copies. I don't know if all the ones in Drury Lane signed, or only the 3 I managed.
There's a big stack that I had to sign at one point, so there's some that are, or I think we'll do some initially that will be, or you can track me down at the radio and I'll pop out and say hi too. Also, I should point out, speaking of some of the financial things, so publishers, 10,000 Lakes Publishing, because they kind of became captivated by Janice too through this process and the editing and just getting to know her through the pages, is they wanted to give 10%, they are giving 10% of all their proceeds to various organizations that support clean water advocacy in the Boundary Waters region. So we're kind of going to be circling some of that back, and wanted to do that to honor Janice too. So there's some more reason to support the project.
I have one last question. Do you think she would have liked the book?
Well, she got to read a pretty good percentage of it. I sent her the draft chapters because I wanted to make sure that, for accuracy, that there's a lot of dates and so many different names and people coming and going over 35 years, people who worked there and different people who hired her and things. So she got to read a pretty good percentage of it. which would sometimes be a little contentious between us because she'd want things changed, and I'd be like, "But Janice, this is this is what you said, and that's what happened." And but yeah, I know that she was proud of where we were at, and then of course, like I said, I had to change some things, but nothing major. If she, my one biggest regret in this whole thing, Jay, is that I didn't get to hand her a copy and be there with her as she looked through it, because it's one thing, it was like a Word document and a PDF that she was looking at, and that's not the same as holding a book and seeing her photo on the cover. That is the one thing that I'm still, why, and maybe you can even hear in my voice, is that it's just, I'm excited about the book coming out. I'm glad that it's out, but I'm still, there's an element of sadness for me because she's not here to share this with. Like I would definitely want you to be interviewing her, not me right now. So yeah, I know she'd be proud of it, and so that makes me happy.
All right, well, thanks again, Joe, and I'll let you go now, but again, if you want to pick up the book, it's called Her Island.
That's right.
By Joe Friedrichs. Find it where you find your books.
Yeah.
Or request it. If your local bookstore doesn't have it, request it, because shopping local right now is a very important factor in life, and I'm sure they'd be happy to order it. So. Yeah,
thanks, Jay. I'm glad things are going well with the podcast, that you and Martha are doing great, and that it's still going strong. So I appreciate you having me on here. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks a lot, Joe. Exploring the North Shore is sponsored by The Big Lake. The Big Lake is an approachable art gallery and gift shop located in the beautiful harbor town of Grand Marais, Minnesota, as well as online at thebigLakeLife.com. The Big Lake provides a beautifully curated and fun shopping experience to complement your North Shore adventures with artists and products that reflect the culture, values, allure, and lifestyle of the North Shore. Shop online at www.thebigLakeLife.com and use promo code EXPLORE for 15% off your first online order. I really hope that you enjoyed that interview. I want to thank Joe a ton for helping me through the whole phone interview process. I have never done a phone interview before. Every interview we've done on the podcast here has been done face-to-face. We've even done some, quote, COVID interviews where, if you recall, Hartley Acero, we did one with her where we were sitting in her garden. And then the interview with Carl Madsen, I referenced that even in the interview with Joe, where we were sitting on the deck of one of his cabins up at Rockwood Lodge. So I've continued to do some interviews, but this was the first phone interview I ever did. I'm not very familiar with them or the process, so Joe volunteered to actually record the conversation for me, sent me that file. So a huge thanks to Joe, not just for the interview, but also for helping me out with getting the interview done and in so that we can give you this information. So now, on to the mentioned giveaway that I'm doing. I have 2 signed copies of Her Island by Joe Friedrichs, of course, signed by Joe. A little backstory as to how I got those. I didn't actually see Joe for the interview. When I purchased the books that I was going to have him sign from Drury Lane here in Grand Marais, they were actually already signed. So great news, because then I don't have to track him down to get him to sign those. They are already signed, they're already ready to go, and you can have the opportunity to win one. We're going to do this in 2 different platforms. The first one is going to be, the first book I'm going to give away will be given away through our Instagram. That is at Exploring North Shore, which is a little bit different than our podcast name, which is Exploring the North Shore. I took the out. So head over to Instagram at Exploring North Shore and find my big giveaway post there, and you will then follow directions there to get yourself entered in to win the first copy of Her Island signed by Joe Friedrichs. The second copy is going to be given away over on Facebook. So if you're not on Instagram but you are on Facebook, head over there to Exploring the North Shore on Facebook. Again, find the giveaway image, follow the directions to enter for the second signed copy of Her Island. If you are on both Instagram and Facebook, good news, because you can actually enter in both places. I'm not going to police where you enter. So if you have both, go ahead and enter on both. The book would make a great addition to your library, a wonderful gift for somebody. So I'm going to get, the giveaway will start today, Tuesday the 15th, and it will end on Tuesday the 22nd. So it's going to run for a week on both platforms where you can enter and get your name in. I will try to get it sent out to the winner right away on the 22nd. If you are local to Cook County, I can even go drop it off. Just leave it in your mailbox or on your porch, whatever you want. And then you can have it in time for Christmas. If I am having to mail it out though, because I probably wouldn't get it out until the 23rd, unfortunately, it won't arrive in time for it to be a Christmas gift, but you could give it to someone else or just read it and add it to your own library. So this is a wonderful book. I really enjoyed reading it. Not to discount Joe, and I'm pretty familiar with his writing, and I'm not sure what I expected from the book, but I was not expecting the book that I sat down and read. In fact, after the first chapter, I kind of had to stop for the night and I couldn't read on. The first chapter is a bit of a wallop. I mean, it's very hard. Joe did mention that it is about the drowning. So in the chapter, somebody does die. So it's a very heavy topic, but then it gets more into Janice's life, and I've just been really, really enjoying it. And I hope you do too. So I hope you enter the giveaways. Again, head over to Instagram at Exploring North Shore, and then also head over to Facebook at Exploring the North Shore. Look for a big image that has the picture of the book on it, and it'll say giveaway really big across it, so you won't have to search around for it. Just look for that image, and the instructions to enter the giveaway are right there. You have from today, that is the 15th of December 2020, through the 22nd of December 2020 to enter the giveaway. So if you're listening to this episode after the fact, I apologize, it is over, but you can still pick up the book at your local bookstore or on Amazon and enjoy it. And another thing I wanted to throw in, the day after we did the interview, which was on the 10th of December, so on the 11th, Joe sent me an email to tell me that his book is now #1 on Amazon for the topic of canoeing. So of every book on Amazon about canoeing, Her Island is currently sitting at #1. And I believe when we did the interview, he said it was #1 in Ontario Outdoors or Canadian Outdoors, one of the two. So he is on a second #1 list right now. So huge congratulations to Joe. And I know we've missed him on the podcast, but it was for a good reason. So I hope you can pick up that copy of the book and read it and understand more about Janice Matichuk and the amazing life she had living on Cache Bay in Quetico, and can experience that through Joe's words and just get to know this woman. If you never had a chance to meet her like me, you can get to know her as a person, or if you've had the chance to meet her, I think you'll be able to relate a lot to what happens in the book just from knowing the person herself. Like, yeah, that's the Janice I remember. All right, so thank you again for listening. This has been another episode of Exploring the North Shore. Check out our social media pages. We are on Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok at Exploring North Shore on both Instagram and TikTok, and Exploring the North Shore on Facebook. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and enjoy listening to Exploring the North Shore, I would love to see what you have to say. Please review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. So thank you so much for listening today. We will be back again. Hopefully, actually, I'm trying to get episodes out a little bit sooner. Martha and I are going to rotate a little bit on doing solo episodes. So we have both started researching our own solo episodes so we can bring you some more history and fun facts about the North Shore. Thank you for listening.